Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. What a statement, right?
Yeah.
Really makes you stop and think.
It's incredibly provocative, and it's the opening shot from Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract, a truly foundational piece of political thinking.
Absolutely. And today, we're really going to get into this revolutionary book. Our aim is to unpack its core arguments, look at Rousseau's, well, quite radical vision for what makes political authority legitimate.
And explore why it still feels so relevant, doesn't it, to how we think about freedom in society even now.
Exactly. We want to pull out the key insights from this work, help you get a solid grasp on a text that genuinely did change the world.
And, much like the kind of analysis you find on Mindful Moments, which is our YouTube channel looking at books through AI,
Right.
the goal here is really to spark some reflection, some rational thinking about these, pretty complex ideas.
Okay, so let's start right back at that opening line. Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains.
It immediately throws up this huge question, this paradox. How can we be inherently free, yet find ourselves constrained, hemmed in by the societies we live in?
It's not just a fancy phrase, is it?
Not at all. It's the core problem Rousseau is wrestling with. He's essentially forcing us to question the very basis of political power. Where does it really come from?
So if we start free but end up in chains, metaphorically speaking, what's his way out? What's the solution to this paradox?
He proposes something specific, the social contract. But it's crucial to understand what he means by that.
Okay.
He argues it's the only legitimate foundation for political authority. It's an agreement that all citizens enter into willingly for their mutual safety and well-being.
So it's not based on power or tradition.
No, he completely rejects the idea that legitimate power can come from just brute force or, divine right, like kings used to claim, or even the kind of power a master has over a slave. None of that counts as legitimate.
Only consent matters.
For Rousseau, yes. True justice, legitimate rule, it can only spring from mutual agreement and a genuine focus on the common good. What's best for everyone.
That insistence on consent is fascinating. Because if a government isn't based on that collective agreement,
then it's illegitimate. Simple as that for him. Not just flawed, but fundamentally wrong. This was, incredibly radical for his time.
you had kings claiming power by birthright.
Exactly. And Rousseau comes along and says, essentially, unless you've agreed to be governed this way, that government has no real moral authority over you. It was a direct challenge to the status quo across Europe.
It really raises the stakes. So if consent is the key, who actually holds the power in this system? He talks about the sovereign, right?
Yes, but his idea of the sovereign is different. It's not a king or even a specific ruling body.
Okay, so what is that?
The sovereign, for Rousseau, is the collective entity. It's formed by all the citizens when they come together to decide on the laws. It's the people acting as one political body.
And the sovereign body is guided by the general will.
That's right. And the general will is probably the most central, maybe the most debated concept in the whole book.
So what exactly is it? It's not just what most people happen to want at any given moment.
No, definitely not. It's not simply adding up individual desires or finding a compromise between different factions. Rousseau believes the general will is always directed towards the public good.
Always. How can that be?
He argues it represents the common interest that transcends private individual concerns. Imagine if everyone could somehow think purely about what's best for the whole community, setting aside their own selfish wants.
Okay.
The general will is what they would rationally agree on as serving that collective benefit. It's what serves everyone equally, even if it clashes with what some individuals might personally prefer.
And that leads directly to the role of laws then.
Precisely. If the general will aims for public benefit, then laws must only be enacted if they serve that collective interest.
And they have to apply to everyone equally.
Absolutely. General and impartial. No special treatment. No laws designed to benefit just one group or person. Universal application. Universal benefit. That's the ideal.
So the sovereign, the people acting together, has ultimate authority in the public sphere.
Yes, its authority is absolute in that sense, within the realm of public matters. But, and this is important, it's limited.
Limited how?
Limited to things that actually affect the community as a whole. It doesn't, or shouldn't, intrude into purely private affairs that have no impact on the collective.
That distinction seems key. But how does this idea, the general will, actually form the basis for a functioning government? Does Rousseau see the government as the sovereign?
No, that's another crucial distinction. The government is different from the sovereign. The government is just the agent, the administrator.
The ones who carry out the laws.
Exactly. They execute the general will, which is determined by the sovereign, the people. The government serves the people. It doesn't rule them. It's the servant, not the master.
Okay, so the people hold the ultimate power, expressed through this general will. But what does this mean for me as an individual? You mentioned giving up some freedom. Does that really make us freer in the end?
Rousseau thinks so, yes. He makes this really interesting distinction between natural liberty and civil liberty.
Natural versus civil, what's the difference?
When you enter the social contract, you give up your natural liberty. That's basically the freedom to do whatever you want, driven by your instincts, limited only by your own strength. Think survival of the fittest, almost.
Right, a kind of wild freedom.
But in exchange, you gain something he sees as far more valuable, civil liberty.
And why is that better?
Because natural liberty is, well, chaotic, potentially dangerous, and ultimately limited by your own power relative to others. Civil liberty, though, is grounded in reason, morality, and security.
How so?
It's based on laws. But crucially, these are laws that you, as a member of the sovereign collective, have prescribed for yourself. You're not just following orders from someone else.
You're participating in making the rules you live by.
Exactly. It's a move from being driven purely by impulse to governing yourself through reason and aiming for the common good.
That flips the common idea of freedom on its head, doesn't it? Usually we think freedom means less law, fewer rules.
Right. But Rousseau argues that true, meaningful freedom is actually found in obedience, but only obedience to the right kind of law.
The law you've had a hand in creating.
Yes. He has this powerful line. Obedience to the law one prescribes to oneself is liberty. Think about that. You're following rules that reflect the general will, rules you helped form as part of the sovereign.
So obeying the law becomes an act of self-governance, not submission.
That's the core idea. It preserves, even enhances your autonomy within the society. You shift from being merely a subject under a ruler to being an active citizen.
It's a profound kind of freedom he's describing.
It really is. It's not about being free from rules, but free through rules you collectively create. So yes, you surrender that impulsive natural liberty.
But you gain what he calls moral freedom and genuine independence, secured by law.
It's a powerful trade-off he proposes. And it makes you, the listener, ask, why is that surrender necessary? And how does this social contract actually protect individual rights if you're part of this collective will?
It suggests our rights are secured because we participate in making the laws that define them.
Precisely. A freedom guaranteed by the collective rather than threatened by it.
Now, Rousseau wasn't keen on other government types, was he? He critiques monarchy, aristocracy.
He saw them as fundamentally flawed because they lacked that direct citizen participation in shaping the general will. Power wasn't held by the sovereign people.
He really favored direct democracy, didn't he? Where the people themselves make the laws.
He did, ideally. That's the purest expression of the general will. But he wasn't naive. He saw huge practical problems, especially as societies get larger and more complex.
Like, how do you actually get everyone together? How do you stop powerful groups from hijacking the process?
Exactly. He understood that maintaining focus on the true common good is incredibly difficult. People get swayed by their own interests or form factions groups pushing their own agenda.
This sounds familiar even today.
Absolutely. This is where he introduces the idea of the legislator. Not a ruler, mind you, but a kind of wise, almost detached figure.
Like a guide.
Yes, someone who could help a new society especially to see its common interest and frame laws that genuinely reflect the general will without imposing their own will, sort of setting the moral compass.
And underpinning all of this, for Rousseau, was the need for equality. Why was that so critical for him?
He believed that significant inequality, especially in wealth and status, was poisonous to the general will.
How so?
Well, think about it. If some people are incredibly wealthy, they might be tempted to buy influence, to bend the laws, to favor themselves, ignoring the common good.
On the poor.
If people are too poor, they might be forced to sell their votes or their political voice just to survive. In either extreme, people aren't participating freely and equally, thinking about the collective.
So, factions and inequality are major threats.
Huge threats. Factions put their group interest first, dividing the community. Inequality prevents people from relating as free and equal citizens focused on the shared good. He didn't demand absolute equality.
Enough that nobody's rich enough to buy someone else, or poor enough to have to sell themselves.
That's the essence of it. Fair enough conditions for everyone to participate authentically.
So, okay, maybe different government structures could work depending on the place, a small city-state versus a larger nation.
Yes, he acknowledged that practical forms might vary.
But the non-negotiable principle is that legitimacy always comes from the general will, from the people themselves.
Always. Anything else for Rousseau is just another form of those chains he started with. The source of authority is what matters above all.
You can see why this was such explosive stuff back then.
Definitely. It forced people to look at their own governments and ask, who does this really serve? Me? Or the people? Just asking the question was dangerous.
And the social contract didn't just appear out of nowhere. It landed right in the middle of major political and social shifts in 18th century Europe.
Yeah, you had widespread discontent with absolute monarchies, glaring social divides, and the intellectual ferment of the Enlightenment challenging old ideas.
His ideas were just so radical for the time. Small wonder the book got banned and burned, and he ended up in exile for a while.
But you couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. Despite the suppression, the ideas spread like wildfire. They fueled revolutionary thinking, challenging power structures everywhere.
You really can't overestimate its impact, can you?
Not really. It became a touchstone for political theory. Debates about liberty, sovereignty, where legitimate power comes from, they were all profoundly reshaped by Rousseau's work.
Concepts like popular sovereignty, the idea that power rests with the people,
And the general will, they dramatically shifted how people thought about what a government should be. It was essentially a call for self-rule.
and you see its influence echoing later, like in the French Revolution's Declaration of Rights.
Absolutely. And in the ongoing evolution of democratic ideas and citizenship around the world, he pushed us to rethink freedom within society and how to structure society to protect that freedom.
It wasn't just theory. It offered a kind of blueprint, a vision for organizing society differently, prioritizing both the collective good and individual autonomy.
He fundamentally changed the conversation about power. Who holds it and why?
Okay, so as we wrap up our discussion here, maybe a final thought to consider. We live in these huge, complex, modern societies now, immensely diverse, globally connected.
Very different from Rousseau's time in many ways.
So what can his idea of the general will actually teach us today? How do we possibly navigate our collective interests versus our individual freedoms in this current reality?
It still pushes us to ask tough questions, doesn't it? Are we truly governing ourselves collectively? Or are we, maybe in new ways, still caught in some kind of chains? Are our decisions really for the common good?
Or are they mostly driven by powerful interests, by factions, as he worried?
It's a question worth wrestling with.
Definitely a challenging thought to leave you with. If this conversation sparked your interest, please keep exploring. Mindful Moments and our other podcasts dive into more fascinating books and thinkers.
Yeah, often using that AI analysis lens to help connect ideas and encourage critical thinking. We try to make these big ideas accessible.
So if you found this valuable, please subscribe for more discussions like this one, and maybe share it with someone else who loves to dig into these kinds of ideas.
We hope it encourages you to think critically about these concepts in your own world.
And hey, if you want to go straight to the source, you can grab a copy of The Social Contract, check the link in our show notes, and dive into Rousseau's own words. It's quite the read.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thanks for tuning in. We hope this gave you some food for thought about freedom, society, and maybe those chains Rousseau mentioned.